welcome to Hero with 1,000 Potions, a gaming podcast where two 30-something gamers examine the storytelling and gameplay of popular and niche RPGs. It's like a book club with geysers that can blast you halfway up a mountain. This is Season 1, and we're talking about Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. My name is Tyler, and I'm joined by my friend Nate. You're invited to join us on this adventure by playing Xenoblade alongside these episodes, where we will explore and talk about Xenoblade chapter by chapter. This episode, we're talking about Chapter 10, where the group visits Valak Mountain, or Mount Valak. Hi, Nate.
Hey, how's it going?
Fine. Nate, I'm going to try to swear less this time.
An age rating or something like that for our podcast, do we need to warn people? Because I'm definitely going to pass over that line here this episode.
I'm going to try not to.
I'm also glad that you said geyser, like any self-respecting adult should.
The word geyser?
Yes, we'll review that later on why I'm happy that you said geyser.
Okay. I'm going to put it out there that last episode, I feel like I dropped so many four-letter words that we're going to have a swear jar this episode, and we're going to play a little sound effect every time I say a naughty word, and we'll see how many coins we pick up at the end of the episode here.
Sounds good. I put a little subtitle for Chapter 10, and that subtitle is Belaying Burnout, because I was feeling a little burnt out by last chapter, and maybe...
Were you?
Well, just, we talked about it, how seeing all of those scenes as visions and then having to walk through the whole thing and nothing's changed, nothing's different. It's just all kind of like, you knew it was going to happen and then it happened. So I was feeling a little burnt out, and maybe that was apparent in that episode. But this one has me kind of back into the video game space of enjoying the medium for what it is and using that to its fullest and having a good time.
This chapter was more video gamey than anime-y, and I did appreciate that. What I mean by that is there was more adventuring and exploring and things to do and less pushing the confirm button to keep advancing text. Although it was kind of front-loaded with cutscenes, and we'll get into it shortly here. But yeah, it was kind of a short and sweet chapter, which was very refreshing.
Yes. We
begin in the High Entian throne room here. According to Callian, the ascension to the throne, to the Emperor throne that Melia has inherited, takes place 1 year from today, which is completely befuddling from me, because you might think that when she died, she just inherits the throne. No, there is a 1 year cooldown period before she assumes it, and Callian will be regent for that year. And Larithia is there, and she says, that's cool, we're into that. That's her majesty's decree. So if this was Melia's will, then she's into it.
They asked if nobody objects, and the silence is apparent. Everybody's down for it. This brings up for me that it's like there's been 3 different times where I definitely felt like, okay, Melia is officially the Empress now. And then next cutscene, I find out she's not yet. So there's been I want to just throw it out there, maybe 3 scenes where she's standing in front of a group of people with multiple officials nearby, and the discussion is being had of her ascension and her speciality and all of these things, yet she isn't actually the thing yet. So I just feel like they keep blue-balling us on her actually doing the thing.
Blue winging.
Yes. Whatever the High Entian use, it is not being used right now. That's just interesting. I mean, there's multiple layers of confusion there of times where I thought, okay, she's the Empress now, and then she isn't yet.
Larithia, in her sexy dominatrix outfit, suggests that we go on an offensive attack, and Callian has a very muted reaction to that. He goes, you're thinking we should wage an attack on the Mechons while the High Entian homeland is licking its wounds? And that just seems like such a wiener, pathetic thing to say. It didn't really inspire courage and confidence in me, but they do go forward with the idea of an attack. But what sort of form that'll take, they're not super sure yet, and Callian's looking for a commander for these forces here. Who's going to organize this Alchemath military to make some major offensive?
Larithia says that, quote, the Ministry of Research has the ideal solution. And if we're to infer that solution was the formation of that anti-Mechon army, so to speak, what is the Ministry of Research doing forming armies? Shouldn't they just be like dusting off statues and investigating ether bubbling up in certain locations? There seems to be a disconnect, or maybe a little bit of power grab here from Larithia making these kinds of suggestions.
Well, we know she's in allegiance with some of these antagonists, and so maybe she's moving chess pieces along to set a trap for somebody. Maybe if they move the military out of Alchema space, out of the Entian homeland, would that expose the capital? Maybe there's some serious strategy going on there.
And that's like Callian says, oh, we're licking our wounds and everything. It's like, I don't know how many wounds there were. You guys were just in a bunch of ships shooting at other ships. These people are either dead or flew off somewhere else. I don't know. I get what he's saying, that collectively the nation is, dealing with the loss of many lives and the damage done. But basically this plan is that, there's going to be some High Entian in the mix, but they're going to be recruiting more individuals from other races. And we'll get into that as the proposal is made here.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, the capital looks perfectly fine. There isn't one laser blast on it. I mean, Prison Island was the one that was really under attack.
It reminds me of Colony 9. They're like the devastation and heartbreak and everything. And then And then a week later, people are selling flowers, and there's only like one NPC who's like, I still have nightmares from that night, but everybody else is like, hey, what should I do tomorrow? I'm thinking of getting a new job. What would really inspire me? And it's like, your whole family just died a week ago. I wouldn't worry about that right now. So it reminds me of kind of this game reestablishing the status quo, because we still want to use these areas for content after pretending that they were obliterated or devastated in some way. It's a stark contrast. In this time that me and my family was sick, we kind of changed hands. It was me, my wife, and a guest of ours, and we just took our turns playing Elden Ring. And that world is a whole world where just everything looks like absolute shit. Like, you go to a castle that's fully staffed and occupied by enemy combatants, and the castle itself looks like it's falling apart, and then it's been through 600 battles and sieges and mortars, holes in every wall, and towers toppled over, and it's like the entire world is just from front to back just completely falling apart. So that's kind of stands in contrast to what we're seeing in Xenoblade, where things are under attack, yet they still stay pristine, unless it's like Colony 6, which just was a completely flat, almost looked terraformed in a way of like, hey, would you like to build a brand new city where this city used to be? We're pulled back to the party hanging out in their designated bubble room after this discussion.
We've been hanging out in this room for 3 chapters.
Yeah, this is officially our room. Riki wonders why everyone is sad. It's probably because they're hungry, he thinks. And Ryan says Homs aren't sad just because they're hungry. They have deep, complex feelings, and Riki just envies their small bellies because he postulates that they have small bellies and that he's always hungry because he has a big belly. But when I think about it, it's like, Riki, you are the size of our bellies in their totality. So I don't see the connection there of how you can eat so much unless you're just literally constantly shitting all the time. Does that go to the swear jar for the shitting all the time?
You didn't self-ascribe yourself to the swear jar.
Okay, well, maybe I'll do enough swearing for the both of us then.
Oh, sure. All right, that's good enough. Dunban's excused himself from the party. He hasn't been back yet, probably because he saw Fiora at the end of the previous chapter. Recall that Fiora is Dunban's younger sister, and as we're talking about this, Melia wonders, well, who is this Fiora? And someone says, we thought she was killed in the attack on Colony 9, and I'm thinking in my head, please don't flashback, please don't flashback, please don't flashback. We flashback.
Of course.
Of course we flashback. We flashback to chapter 2, Melia being scooped up, and then once Shulk snaps back into it, he says he should speak with Dunban, and so he steps out.
You might have just said that Melia got scooped up and eaten when you meant to say Fiora.
Really? Oh, okay.
Shulk decides that, Dunban's off alone. He really needs to speak to him, and Shulk needs to get this straightened out and kind of reaffirm why he's doing what he's doing. Like I talked about last episode, we had that kind of thing where Shulk's been given all of these revelations about the true heir to the Monado, the ether rising, Bionis waking up, the world potentially coming to the end, and his motivation is still Fiora and revenge. And so he kind of got the revenge, but not really. He got to the revenge flash forward scene, but didn't actually kill Metalface yet. So, but now Fiora's in the mix as well. So he is still kind of single-minded in his vision that none of these other stakes really affect him. So he tells himself again, she's the whole reason we're out here. Or maybe Ryan says that if I'm remembering back to the cutscene. But either way, that's their motivation, despite everything else that's come up and happened. The disintegration of a giant blue man that created all of the weapons you wield.
Yeah.
That doesn't affect anything. We're still focused on the two things we care about.
When Shulk talks to Dunban, they both agree that it's disturbing that Fiora didn't recognize the two of us, but they're glad that she's not dead. Maybe she's recoverable, although she's in this strange state of mind control, soul transfer, although these characters don't know much about the soul transfer. I don't know, maybe somebody does, but we don't think they do. And then Dunban says this thing that's very flattering to Shulk, but it has this terrible taste in my mouth, and I hated it. He says, if Fiora were to be with anyone, it should be you.
I always thought if Fiora were to be with anyone, it should be you.
What that looks like to me is this sort of, maybe you can check me on this, but is this kind of like an anime trope where there's this hottie and two dudes are talking about it and and you kind of materialize her and you go, I think she belongs to you.
Maybe it's like the protective older brother thinking like, okay, because Shulk does mention, hey, Ryan spends just as much time with her as I do. Maybe Dunban's thinking like, yeah, I know he does. Get in there and save this woman from fucking Ryan and his dumbass. What struck me about this scene though is, you remember in that scene in Colony 9 after Fiora died, how Dunban told us he's totally not sad at all?
Yeah.
He tells us he's not sad again. He says, I'm not sad. I'm not sad. You can put the clip in, grab it, and put it right here.
Everyone who died in that war had something they wanted to protect. Family, friends, loved ones, their home. So they fought to protect them. And we won. No matter how painful, no matter how hard, it's nothing to be sad about. I decided that there and then.
Dunban's not sad. Dunban is never sad. Don't get him wrong, or he'll set you straight. He is not sad. So just let's make that clear that Dunban is never sad. He is the cool guy of the game, and we cannot make him uncool by him having a feeling here.
It marshals his motivation to keep pressing forward here. And by the end of this scene, and this scene is very emotional and kind of tender between these two young men. They say, we're going to help one another, help Fiora remember who she really is. Let's go tell the others. They're making something out of their grief. They're inspired to do something about it. And so they run back to our new conference room.
So moving on, we are summoned to Callian. He is now the regent de facto leader, and this plan that we kind of alluded to before that's being put in place is he wants to end the High Entia's isolation. They believe themselves beyond the reach of the Mechon and untouchable, above the issues of the lower people, and he sees that that's not the case anymore, and it was their mistake. He apologizes, whoop-de-doo. But he wants to assemble an army of Homs, Nopon, and High Entia as an allied force. I have to wonder, what is the martial value of the Nopon and that they actually provide, because the only Nopon warrior I've met is Riki, and that was done diegetically in-game as a joke. And every other Nopon alive asks me to fight and kill things for them because they'll get eaten if they try and do it themselves. So I'm not sure how the Nopon fit into the unified army against the Mechon, but we'll see.
They've got to be supply lines and logistics, because throughout the world, when you run into a Nopon in the wild, they usually have a shop, or they're adventuring, they're traveling. They're probably like locking down those supply lines.
That's a good point. My dad in Vietnam he got drafted and he took some tests, some aptitude tests and everything. And they're like, oh, hey, we're going to have you doing mortar calculations and logistics and things like that. And he was like, yeah, I failed math in high school. What? So maybe they have the Nopon doing logistics then.
Or maybe those pollen maybe they can kick that into high gear and create this like repository of weapons of mass pollen destruction.
We also have the possibility of the 11th hour transformation a la Choo Choo of they can become the size of a mechon themselves.
Oh my god, is that coming?
I don't know. I'm just saying. We didn't get that till the late in the game with Choo Choo. That was the Xenogears had the limiters and nano machines, right? Same exact thing with Metal Gear Solid. Same time that game came out, everything. It just turned into anytime you want to explain something, it was just nano machines, and we turned off the nano machines, we turned on the nano machines, and now this thing we want to happen happens. It's like the Force, like, hey, there's force healing now. The end of the saga, the culmination of everything that's been happening over 40, 50 years. Let's just invent this thing called the dyad, and it'll solve all our problems, and we'll mention it like 30 times in the movie. And the people who like old Star Wars will just be like, what the fuck am I listening to here?
I thought about that, about introducing these new powers. And if you did look back at all the movies, they did progressively introduce new force powers at about the same rate as even the ones that you and I are balking at in recent years.
Yes, and I agree. That's fine. You can introduce new stuff. But when it's like at the 11th hour and you just kind of pull it out of your ass of like, this fixes everything. It's one thing to have a new power of like, let's say force healing shows up and, it affects a minor plot point or it helps you get through small conflict or whatever. But like to bring up in the 11th hour, like if you take a Sith and a Jedi and you combine their powers and the crossing of, whatever, you can destroy the bad guy forever, eternally. It's like, there's no setup for that one at all. So that's kind of my beef. And maybe Choo Choo wasn't that bad. Maybe Choo Choo didn't go to those lengths, but it was an 11th hour ass pull, so to speak.
11th hour ass pull. I love it. I'm sure we've got a few of those in our future. So Callian says, forgive our hubris. Our decision to ignore the assault on Sword Valley a year ago was shameful, and an allied army must be formed, and you must be its ambassadors. So a little bit ago, I said that in the original scene, this is when they were asking about who's going to lead this army. That didn't happen in that moment. That happens here. And Shulk isn't super interested in it, which means Ryan steps forward and says, leave the ambassador stuff to me, Shulk, which is a great big all caps 3 underlined LOL.
Yes. I was thinking to myself, it's like, maybe this army does just need a big meathead to tell everybody to go forward, stick to it, keep going as they fall into a pit that they themselves triggered.
Eventually, Melia says she is going to be the ambassador. She's going to remain at the capital so the rest of the team can find Fiora because, well, Melia's not extremely emotionally invested in finding Fiora, although she's getting a sense that Fiora might be the key to, unraveling the whole force, the whole Mechon force. It's at this time that Melia and Charlotte have a private conversation about Shulk. Nate, what was that test you said about two women talking about somebody that's hopefully not a man as a means to recognize a story's measure of feminism?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a measure of feminism. It's kind of considered just a facet of good writing, is that can two women have an entire conversation with each other, like begin scene, end scene, setting, topic, conversation, without referring to a man in any capacity? For example, Tyler, when I talk to you about my day or certain things just going on, I can probably go through that whole conversation or just a generic conversation without referring to my wife, your wife, some woman out in the world. But for some reason in media, whenever women converge on screen, in writing, wherever it is, the topic of discussion has to be centered around some man or something a man did or something they want a man to do, etc. So that's kind of the test, is like, in terms of just good writing, can characters exist as self-actualized beings that have their own motivations and characters outside of needing to be attached to other characters in that respect. So that is called the Bechdel test, as I mentioned.
The Bechdel test.
And what game was I playing? Oh, no, I was watching my wife and her friend play River City Girls. And I referred to it as failing the Bechdel test, the video game, because their entire motivation is finding their missing boyfriends. And that's all they talk about all the time is their boyfriends.
You can't silence love, Mr. Rudis. We'll find whoever took our boyfriends and beat them into the street. Also, your lessons are boring. Yeah, what she said.
Nice. But they're punching dudes in the jaw left and right to do it.
Yes. So, it's cool. It's like a girl power game, but at the same time, like, maybe they could have their own reasons for punching everybody. That just involves them.
Right. So in this failure of a Bechdel test, Charla says she's going to return Shulk to Melia as soon as they recover Fiora because it's important to keep Shulk from falling in love with Fiora after they recover her? ?
Listen, I'll keep an eye on Shulk for you. Whatever can you mean? It's a risky strategy, letting Shulk go off and just hoping he'll come back to you. Shulk and I are merely... Yeah. But remember, the longer he's away, the more chance his feelings for you will fade.
Charla is on Melia's side, and she sees Melia's interest. Her womanly intuition kicks in when it comes to, I don't know, interest in other men. Again, even the basis of that, like, I'm a woman, you're a woman. I can see when you're thinking about a man. That's a little questionable right there. But hey, that's the way the game is presenting it, not me. That's what we're seeing in the scene here. So Charla is reaffirming that she's on Team Melia. Well, we've got Dunban on Team Fiora. So eventually Dunban and Charla are going to have to duke it out for who gets Shulk, right?
What a great heart-to-heart that'll be.
I don't know. Or it could be like a team battle. It could be like a tag team 2v2. It'd be Melia and Charla versus Dunban and Fiora.
That would be amazing.
Sulk.
Oh man, what a Freudian slip, dude. Oh, I love it.
Shulk sitting on a throne a la Mortal Kombat where you see Shao Kahn in the background. Shulk is just sitting there with his staff, the Monado planted into the side of the throne here, watching, going, round one, fight.
Round one, fight.
Then the four of them duke it out.
Hope we see that. I really do.
It seems like Shulk's hesitancy to the anti-Mechan army is just for the fact that he now sees that Fiora is kind of a Mechan. And at the end of this chapter, we might have to do a talk of what even constitutes a Mechan at this point, because is the Mechan the giant robot they're riding on? Is that a Mechan? Or is the Homs inside of it that has modifications to their body a Mechan? We've already seen that Fiora, like, we talked about it when we saw her last chapter. We kind of expected her to just be in this catatonic, like, shell state.
Yes.
Being used as kind of like a vessel tool to negate the effects of the Monado. But she straight up just, like, wakes up, talks, takes her helmet off herself, So at this point, it feels just like more like they're piloting a mech to me. So
yeah,
we'll have to have that conversation of later after this chapter is concluded with additional details of like what even constitutes a Mechan.
The line is getting really fuzzy.
Yeah, and so for Shulk to be told, hey, let's create an army that's anti-Mechan, this is a conflict for him because he still has feelings for somebody who would be considered part of that group. So that's why I see his hesitancy, at least. They kind of, it's not super clear, but I think they lightly touch on that in the dialogue, that's why he's not doing it. So, but yeah, there's the conflict there, and Melia doesn't have this attachment to Fiora, so I don't know what her reasoning for, like, at the end of the last scene, Shulk was like, hey, they killed your dad, let's go murder the shit out of them. Like, Shulk was the one talking her into revenge, but now Shulk's the one that doesn't want to make an army to go get revenge. I don't know.
The group gathers at the teleporter below Alchemath to say farewell to Melia and Callian and everybody else as we head on out here. And then there's a twist. Callian, who's originally passive-aggressive about Shulk refusing the ambassadorship, says he's got a decoy Melia in his pocket, and he's going to use it as a means to release Melia from duty and assist Shulk. So it's really going to be Callian marshaling these forces here, but we've got this fake Empress elect here. She's in the mask, of course. We know Melia's going to wear the mask, and she's there. She's present in the conversation, although she doesn't speak. And so Melia can come with. And the mission is now that, well, we are going to go to Galahad Fortress. That's where the silver-faced Mechan, faced Nemesis, aka Fiora, went to. How we know that, I'm not super sure, but we're going there. And Alvis is coming as well, and he says he's going to be our guide through Valak Mountain, which is on Bionis' arm. This is if you can imagine Bionis, the arm itself is going to be the sword arm. It's the right arm, if I recall properly, and the end of the arm is where Sword Valley begins, and Galahad Fortress is, we don't know exactly, but you might say it's on the hand or it's the wrist of Mechonis, and that is our destination, Galahad Fortress. And off we go with Alvis as our guest.
So can I dog on this scene a little bit here?
Please.
Okay, so something about the construction of these recent scenes, I talked already about how the Melia being Empress thing has kind of been like faked, like a fake out 2 or 3 times now, and so the leadership of this anti-Mechan army, it was suggested to be Shulk, then Ryan stepped up, then Melia was going to hang back and take care of some of this stuff, and now Callion's doing it, and he says, I'm going to try my best, but I'm not really known for my diplomacy or whatever thing. It's so waffly and weird, like, does anybody want this job? Is this going to work out? Like, it kind of makes me feel a little bit weird about the whole situation. But in general, just like on a macro and micro level, there's too many fake outs in these preceding scenes. So it's like, we've got the anti-Mechan army. Whoops. No, we don't. We're not doing that just yet. Somebody else will do it. Then, Melia and Shulk have this emotional parting of ways, and then nope, she's coming with, so all of the emotions we just expressed don't really matter. And then Charla said that she'd be looking out for her, and nope, she actually doesn't need to do that anymore because Melia's just coming with. And even like when Shulk was leaving the town, this is more of like a micro example of just a weird script for me, a weird scene plotting, is that Shulk says, I should go tell Callion my decision, and Melia says, he's too busy, don't worry about it, you guys can just head out, I'll relay the information to him. Well, like 5 seconds later, Callion's walking up, he's not too busy, he's here talking with us, and Shulk doesn't bring it up. So it's like, this is just weird scene dialogue, like scripting to me, where there's just too many fake outs, too many like misconnections, and like, wait, what actually are we doing here? I don't know. It's one of my like pet peeves in observing the scene is you think one thing's happening and then 10 seconds later the opposite is happening. And also there's a quote from Melia here where she's talking to Shulk and she's saying she understands the value of chasing after Fiora because she didn't understand the value of having her father in her life until after he's gone. So she, now that Shulk has this chance to get someone back, she totally gets it. And the exact quote is, I used to think my father didn't love me until the day he died. And I was like, that was literally the only facet to his character, Melia. He was always talking about you and validating you and focusing on your growth and your journey. And like when his wife betrayed him, he was like, that sucks. Wait, Melia, what's Melia doing? Are you okay, Melia? Let's go, Melia, and he's sacrificing his life for her and everything. It's like, how did you not know that your father loved you when that's literally all he talked about all the time? I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, it's kind of strange thinking back on it.
And it's that same kind of thing where like, I feel like the High Entia all just have like emotional lethargy or something, like, do you not feel stuff, guys? Is this a little bit subdued here? Except for feeling things for Shulk. That's totally real and strong and amazing. But everything else is just kind of like, maybe. Also, Callion says that the reason this is all happening, the switch out and Melia going with them, is that she can learn more of the lands of Bionis. And it's like, guys, we're going to Sword Valley. I don't know, does that count as part of Bionis, the giant sword? We're expressly leaving Bionis to go attack Mechonis, and he's like, well, yeah, the whole reason for this mission is for you to learn about the people of Bionis. And it's like, we got a bunch of Homs and Ricky, and I don't know that Ricky's a good representative of the Nopon. Maybe he is. Who knows?
Maybe he is, yeah.
Also, I wrote in my notes that, damn it, Elvis is coming too, because if you remember from last chapter, I now hate this guy. He said too many mysterious things for me to like him anymore.
And he ain't done yet.
Yeah, 2 chapters ago, we were Team Elvis. Now, 1 chapter ago, I was not Team Elvis. And now I'm mad that he's guiding our actions again. He's kind of dictating our path to us again. And before I outlined my theories for Dixon being the driving guide of our path to Prison Island, and now we have Alvis who's in cahoots with Larithia and stepping in for them if they would have liked it. And now he's the one stringing us along instead of Dixon. And it just makes me feel like, hey, Shulk, stop listening to everyone else and just be like, I'm going to go get Fiora. I'm going to hop on one of these jets and just fly there. Fly to Fiora myself. Stop telling me where to go.
Nope, we gotta hoof it. We get on a transport and we fly to Galahad Fortress. No, we don't. We fly to the... Shit, what was the name of that jungle?
Machna Forest.
We fly to Machna Forest so we can walk an entire mountain range and walk all of what I presume is a very hostile Sword Valley environment and walk to Galahad Fortress. We access Valak Mountain from the forest. We land on the side of a cliff that wasn't accessible to us when we were first there a few chapters ago. One quest later, we've erected a rope bridge to connect it to the more regular areas of the zone, and then the entrance to Valak Mountain is just a little bit down the path. It isn't a very interesting area of the zone. There is a faced Mechon-sized Orluga in this area named Suelo Orluga, and well, I'm really OP and I just cut him down super easy.
Yeah, I don't know why. You and I just seem to be fascinated with Orluga. We always talk about them when we meet up with them. Is there like a kindred spirit between the bound hands and feet and masked just...
We're bound to this game like Orlugas are bound to their jungle Jawas.
Yes, exactly. And I was going to say here, the transition from like rainforest, tropical area, they comment about how Riki is used to like scalding heat where he lives. And once he gets to the mountain that he's too cold and this environment is harsh for him. It's like this transition is not subtle. It's like 1 foot long between the rainforest and like frozen tundra, and
it's crazy.
Yeah, and having spent the majority of my life in Wisconsin, I'll say I was nowhere near a rainforest. I was gonna have to walk for quite a while to get anywhere near a tropical plant. So in between these two areas, we get a brief cutscene of Lady Mayneth seemingly back in Makanis HQ, wherever that may be. And she says, Zanza is not dead. I feel it. So even though Metalface stabbed him with the staff, with the green liquid, Lady Mayneth, Fiora, whoever the hell this is, she's apparently not privy to maybe what was going on in that transaction there. And it even kind of begs the question, was Metalface privy to what's going on? Why would Zanza be killed in a way that maybe seemingly he wanted to be? I don't know. I'm so confused. Or like, what the hell even happened in that whole scene? So we'll probably learn the specifics of that later, but suffice to say that Fiora, Lady Mayneth, is not privy to why that would be the case, and she's surprised that Zanza is not dead, actually. And she's also confused on why he released the Monado. So to us, it was pretty clear. We came up with that theory that, he wanted the Monado to be able to cut Homs again for whatever reason, and all of these other entities, the High Entier were trying to mix blood with Homs, the Mechon wanted Hom pilots to be immune to the Monado, everyone wanted to be immune to the Monado, and our theory was that Zanza didn't like that in the slightest, and that's why he unleashed it. Fiora does not know why, so there's that. And so she realizes she has some like sort of feelings for Shulk, the boy, the whatever, the Monado wielder, and she doesn't understand it. And she says, I wish to see the boy again, and flies off to seemingly run into him, and says like, the Monado will connect them, they'll find each other, blah, blah, blah. As she does, Metalface watches on suspiciously as Nemesis Face, so to speak, flies off to pursue Shulk. And there's also an aspect of Lady Mayneth also says that Lord Egil or whatever his name is, he is not aware that she's awake or that she's jetting off. So who knows? We talked about how the Takahashi and these writers, these creators, they do a good job of having multiple factions and angles within groups, and this is also the case here, in my opinion.
I got a big Xenogears vibe in the moment where she says, is Egil aware of my reawakening? Now, I don't know what reawakening means. Does it mean she's reconnecting with her former Hom's self, or is some new thing happening inside of her? And as she's talking, she's using her Hom's mouth to speak, and the cockpit is open in this laboratory repair shop thing, and she looks a lot like Ellie might have looked in her gear, Vierge, and because she has red hair too, she's our leading lady. Well, I guess she's not if she's been gone for so long, but she's a major character, let's say. And I just wondered do you think reawakening means reconnecting with her Homs stuff, or could it mean some serious, very new, very consequential, we don't even know what's going on, reawakening is happening, that's even subverting the expectations of this Edgel guy?
Yeah, I'm curious about that, because it could go all the way back to even our first scene of that revelation of her with the soul transfer and all that stuff going on, because the woman that was resurrecting Fiora Maineth, Nemesis, whatever, she was saying how, like, she's this hope for all of everyone, for the salvation of the world, and that she was going to do this and that and the other thing. I'd have to review what that was, but I remember that scene. Essentially, this woman kind of resurrecting her was saying, like, she's going to be the one to save him, So maybe even going back to that degree, like, does Edgel even realize that a Nemesis face with this Lady Maineth piloting it exists up to this point? Maybe because she was on the mission with Metalface to Alchemoth, but I don't know. It could go back that far of just not even realizing, like, hey, maybe it's just a random suit, and not realizing, like, oh, this super important soul is inside this thing. I don't know, so it's still pretty vague to where I can't make a good theory. And you know how I love making a good theory. So if I'm not willing to make one just yet, then that means I don't have the information I need, to be honest.
It's a good cutscene. They speak in vagaries, and we always end with more questions than answers, as usual. We cross the zone, and we're in... Hold on. So this mountain, the layout of this mountain is actually pretty interesting, because if you can imagine, when you think of a mountain, you think of a peak with slopes on all sides. But this mountain isn't really a mountain. It's an arm. And we start at, like, the top. And so this entire zone is a multi-tiered slope of glaciers and mountain ridges, and it's all down. How many wintry, glacial, Borean tundra zones do you run into in any game where you walk in and you're at the top? I can't think of a single one.
Me neither. And it also kind of lends itself to the idea that, like, these zones are more so enchanted or designed to be the way they are because the rainforest and the Aerith Sea are higher than the snowy mountain, right? Whereas the higher you get, the reason we have snowy mountains is because of the cold from the thinner atmosphere and the elevation above sea levels. You get a certain level of warming from being around the sea. Also, we have their position on the earth, but genuinely, even, like when you go to Seattle, you can quickly go from being on a snowy mountain to being in a warm lakefront area because of elevation, right?
Interesting.
So
yes,
you would think that Valak Mountain would be above Machna Forest, above Aerith Sea in terms of elevation, but it's not. And that kind of lends itself to the idea that these energies that are coming from Bionis, like, we see it at night, and this will be the case here when we look at the nighttime version of the zone, right? We get a different appearance of energy being released, like the land kind of rising up and cultivating itself in certain ways. So maybe it's those unique energies that are deciding the climate of these areas and not just their location.
It's a cool zone. I thought Valak Mountain as a zone, as a place to adventure and get lost in and explore, was really, really cool. It's complex. It's really different. I really enjoyed this place.
Yeah, and we were talking about not taking the airship and now having to hoof it on foot. That was actually, we're joking when we say that, because as a video game player, that is exactly what I want. I don't want to just fly everywhere in a plane and skip everything. I want to actually explore it and run around. And this zone got me back onto my completionist bullshit of actually looking at every nook and cranny on the map. Even after Aerith Sea left me broken and dejected, I am back to enjoying the exploration of being that 100% the map guy.
It's a big map. I think it's bigger than, what was that knee called? Gower Plains. I think it's bigger than Gower Plains, this place.
Possibly, yeah. It's got more to do. It's got more, like, little crevices and things to find, at least in my opinion, and just wacky shit going on that we'll get into a little bit later here. So
when we walk in, Elvis says, "Do you see that formation in the distance?" And he points. It's ruins. It's a glowing spire of blue. We can't really tell what it is from here, but it's way in the distance, and it is a skyscraper tall spire of deep, rich crystal blue. It's very magical looking, and that's our first destination in this zone. We're going to take a break here and set aside next week for part 2, where we will journey into the frozen wastes of Valak Mountain. As always, Nate and I thank you for listening. You're invited to join us on Discord, and we hope you are having a nice weekend. Bye!